I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. My name is Aaron Sandine. As always, we have a very... Justin, can you please call roll?
Chairman Sandine.
Here.
Tom Lennon. Here. Joe Anderson. Michael Brazier. David Bunce. Here. Steve Campbell. Here. Doug Chappelle.
Here.
Pat Hancock.
Here.
Jan Howe. Gilbert Tarantia.
Here.
William Tribble.
Here.
Jeff Rainer. Here. Brian Savage. Dwayne Woody. Mike Worrell. Here. We have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Justin. First and only action item is a review and approval of the...
Two action items.
Two action items?
Minutes. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, minutes. Is that on there? All right. Any questions from or comments from...
The director, I apologize. Does not look like I put the minutes on the agenda, so we'll need to hold.
All right, perfect. We'll add it for next one. All right. So the one and only action item, back to where we are, is the review and approval of the annual report to the governor and to the legislature. So our report is due December 1st. This report was sent out to the commissioners last week and is on the agenda for approval today. This report covers the activities of PSCC, PSCC, and SIEC. I assume that you've all had a chance to review it. If there's any questions, Justin and the team can answer at this time. Otherwise, can I have a motion to approve the annual report, the 2012 annual report to the governor and legislature, to potentially be modified by PSCC with any minor cosmetic, grammatical, or spelling changes as needed prior to the December 1st deadline?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Steve. Gil? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent, Justin. That has passed. The third item on the agenda is an update from Lisa Hansen on the Arizona Department of Homeland Security.
They changed our podium on us, so not quite sure how to make this work.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Just to kind of give you a quick update on upcoming issues in the area of Department of Homeland Security. And as you know, Department of Homeland Security has typically funded quite a few interoperability projects to help move the state forward. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the downsizing that we're currently facing within grant funds and what's up for the future, or what we can see in our crystal ball thus far. Too quick. So we're going to go over the 2012 awards, which began on October the 1st of 12. The state is currently doing an update on the SIRA and the SPR, and I'll go over that and actually tell you what those two acronyms mean, and the core capabilities. So first we'll start with the Homeland Security grants. The 2010 grants were on a one-year grant cycle, and they closed on 9/30/11. We actually have fallout funds that have been reawarded, and we're still working through the fallout funds on 10 and 11. The 11 grants just closed on 9/30/12. We're looking at probably doing some reallocation funds in the January timeframe with our Regional Advisory Council, so there'll be some funds coming back and reawarded out to stakeholders, and we'll talk about what percentage of those are going towards interoperability projects. The 2012 grant funds were just awarded. They started on October the 1st, and they're going to run for 12 months. A significant portion on this that's important to all of us stakeholders is previously the performance period for the federal grants under the Homeland Security Suite was 36 months. It's been reduced to 24 months. That's very significant for us. Even though we award to the local stakeholders for 12 months, that 36 months, by the time we get reallocations back and allowed to reallocate those additional funds, it's put a little bit of a time constraint on managing these grants, but we're definitely encouraging our stakeholders to accomplish during that first 12 months. The 2013 grant guidance is tentatively expected for spring. Again, we will not see that until the federal government approves a budget, and it normally comes 30 to 45 days after a budget is approved. So we already know there's a continuing resolution at the federal level, so we are kind of on pins and needles to see where we're at. In addition to that, we have some insight that there's a potential they'll be combining more grants together. As you know, the interoperability communications grant went away, and all of the objectives within that grant were allowed to be funded under the State Homeland Security Grant Program. In the 2012 funding cycle, the MMRS grant and the CCP went away and were also combined, and we're hearing that there's a potential they might even combine Stone Garden and Uwasi into what's called the new National Preparedness Grant Program. So there's definitely some changes, but we're expecting to see guidance in 13, but we'll talk about the grant informational seminars. We're still standardizing the way that we request for grant applications and forward those grant applications to stay in accordance with state statute that supervises the way that our regional advisory council. So in January, we'll be holding three regionalized informational seminars, one in the Central Phoenix area, one in Flagstaff, and one in Tucson. Those dates will be penciled in, and a save the date will be sent out within the next week or so that everyone will be able to calendar those items. Just to talk about the grant programs, where have we been and where are we going? Pretty significant, lots of numbers up here. I'll give you a quick breakdown on these numbers. 25 cents on the dollar, that's where we're at. In 2 years, we've dropped to 25 cents on the dollar is all that we have. So that's a significant impact to our programs and where we're going. From a federal perspective, what we've been instructed is sustaining our current capabilities. So that's what we're focusing on, is sustaining those current capabilities, which is very difficult, but we know that we also have gaps that we're continuing to build some capabilities, but with a focus on the sustainment. 25 cents on the dollar is not a lot. In the 2012 cycle, we received $17 million. So, and a significant portion of that, our strongest grant program that we have today is Operation Stone Garden, which focuses along the southern border. And we'll talk about each one of these, and I'll give you a little bit of overview as to how they impact the interoperability world when it comes to the grant funding cycle. MMRS and Citizen Corps were zeroed out this year. Tucson Uwasi lost funding last year, as did IECGP. So you can see those responsibilities were absorbed in the other funding streams. So they did not go away. The MMRS community is still receiving funding. The Citizen Corps programs are still receiving funding, but definitely at a reduced dollar amount. I want to go through and just cover some of the direct funded interoperability type grants that were here and give you a quick update. The PSCC grant, which was the Public Safety Interoperability Communications Grant Program, was a one-time grant that funded interoperability communications and equipment. The IECGP grant lasted for several years, and it was mainly for planning and training type activities with the interoperability world. And then the Border Interoperability Demonstration Project, and I have a little bit more detail on each one of those. Again, that's YRCS system, the Yuma Regional System, their grant for just under $4 million. So on the PSCC grant, it was $7.7 million. It was awarded in 2007. Good news is we're closing it out. That's great. We reimbursed just under 100% of that grant, which is really accolades to probably most of the people sitting in the back of this room. Evan Rogers and Phoenix, I don't see Jesse back here, but those big players that really facilitated getting this grant moved to fruition and taking care of any reallocations that we've had from other agencies. The period performance ended, and we're currently in our closeout, so that's good news. The IECGP grant in 2009 was awarded just under $1 million, and to date we've reimbursed 99.8% of that. So we are in our last phases of getting that closed out and completely off the books from our standpoint. So anything over 99% we are considered an absolute success. In 2010 we were awarded just over $800,000 on interoperability, and we reimbursed $192. Now, that's what we reimbursed. So if it looks like only 23%, that doesn't mean that we have the reimbursements aren't in process, but we definitely have plans. We've met the stakeholders that are working this grant to make sure all of those funds will also be closed out by the May 31st of 13 federal closeout date. Here's just a quick breakdown of the 10 projects. And I know I threw this up a year ago or so when I presented last time of who received the funding. So this is the 831. There's some M&A costs out of our office. The asset, the majority of this funding does go back through asset via MOUs from local jurisdictions to administer several different types of projects. And I know these are projects that this committee reviews and approves for them to do. So that's been a great partnership with our local jurisdictions to MOU with the asset office and to make this a palatable grant that's most beneficial for the stakeholders here in Arizona. The bid P. The bid P, real quick, was a $25 million one-time competitive grant program. UMA was awarded just under $4 million. And I actually have a copy of this presentation, but they had specific outcomes, and it's basically a multifaceted project. It's implementing their CAD RMS system along with their radio system region-wide. And for their region, it's basically all of the county of Yuma, and it also integrates and ties into their federal and local partners. It's also tying into the Crit Nation, the Colorado River Indian Tribe, up to La Paz. They just now signed an MOU as well where they're tying in with the La Paz County Sheriff's Office, and they partner back into DPS and AZPSIC. Correct? As long as I see someone shake their head every now and then. They're moving forward with this. They're purchasing the equipment in order to move forward with this. The voice communications and technology. We're coordinating back with the OAC on trying to get some more technical assistance visits to help with training and exercise, and we're waiting for some more responses back from them. But our last round of meetings, this is a project that's definitely moving forward very nicely. Interoperability projects, just to kind of give you a little bit of a rundown as to what percentage of all these funds go towards interoperability projects. For the Homeland Security Grant Program, 34% in 11 was awarded towards interoperability, and in 2012, 23%. So $3.3 million versus $774. And again, we're trying to sustain a lot of projects out there. So proportionately, interoperability is still fared very well in competition. In the Phoenix-Hiwassee, you will definitely see it much smaller, and that's because there's a different concept in that is the local responsibility for interoperability, and they have strong interoperability solutions here in the Metro Phoenix area. So you'll see a much smaller dollar amount going towards interoperability. For Operation Stone Garden, even though there's a caveat, even though $9 million was awarded, this grant is heavily focused towards boots on the ground. Okay, it's an operational grant. Border Patrol really likes us getting to an 80-20 split, which is 80% towards overtime and mileage and 20% for equipment. So what we did was we focused on the 20%. How much of the 20% went towards interoperability? And so those numbers is what we're showing up here. $1 million, which was about 58% of the equipment money was spent towards interoperability, and 36% in the 2012 cycle. So still a significant portion towards this. We definitely see it as officer safety issues as well, and it enhances the communications with our federal partners along the southern border. Direct tribal grant. Even though the direct tribal grant doesn't come through Arizona, we very much stay a part of that, as does the PSCC office here in facilitating those tribes and submitting good applications and assisting them through the process to the best of our ability. And as you can see, in the 2011, 29% of the funds that came into Arizona for the direct tribes went towards interoperability projects, and in 2012, 85%. As a overarching standpoint, the state of Arizona has fared very well on direct tribal funding, and we pretty much lead the nation with receiving the bulk of the funding. So with that, I'm going to open it up if anyone has any questions.
Just have one question for you.
Okay.
So back to the 25 cents on the dollar, right? So obviously those numbers are trending downward. Is that going to stabilize and go out that way? Has Homeland Security kind of given you guys a heads up as to is that continuing to trend down at the same rate?
What we're seeing right now is what we can look at is the budget that was submitted by Secretary Napolitano, and that budget shows a little slight increase, but we're probably pretty much going to look at stabilization for at least another year.
Okay.
And after that, it's who knows. But we're anticipating a stabilization for this upcoming year.
Okay.
Lisa, you were talking about the reallocation of funds. Those are the projects that were submitted that weren't funded. Are those the ones that were built? Funds for when they need to?
Yes, the process for Homeland Security funds is projects that were on the table that received partial funding or no funding over the last cycle are the ones that are competitive for fallout funding. So we don't fund new projects. They're the ones that have already been competed in through a competitive process. They come back up on the table if they were partially or unfunded in the first cycle.
Any other questions for Lisa? Thank you very much.
Thank
Lisa.
you.
Excellent. Next on the agenda is item to do an update on the 2012 COOP and COG statewide exercise. Ron and Jerry.
Good morning. I'm Ron Kopsick with the Arizona Division of Emergency Management. I'm the Director of Training and Exercise Program for the state. Susan Norman asked me to give kind of a high-level overview of the exercise we just recently conducted that had a lot of communication issues tied into it. And I brought with me Jerry Justice, who is our communications subject matter expert, because I know very little about these specific radio communications systems. So I'm the generalist, he's the specific guy. So just the overview of the exercise itself. The exercise was on September 12th of this year, and it built upon an exercise that we did last year, which was an improvised nuclear device set off in downtown Phoenix. So it really didn't matter what the catalyst was for our particular exercise this year, focusing on the continuity of operations. It was a logical flow from the response to an improvised nuclear device to this year was how would that device affect our communications and our ability to carry on our day-to-day operations and continuity of government. So what we practice on the communication side is a complete traditional communications failure, meaning we had no landline communications, no cell phones, no internet, no email, etc. The things that we take for granted on a daily basis are the things that we took out of play for this exercise. Where we were driving the play was toward use of handheld radios or satellite phones. So the overarching question was, how will agencies function with their day-to-day functions in the wake of a nuclear disaster with no traditional communications? So these are some of our overarching objectives. We asked that all participating state agencies be able to reestablish their own interagency communications, communicate with other state agency partners, including communication with our State Emergency Operations Center, as we were kind of the focal point for all other state agencies, reporting to the Governor's Office on the status and the well-being of those agencies. How would they resume essential functions and services, again, with no traditional communications, and we wanted to push them towards restoration of their IT infrastructure, as well as other data functions. A very challenging exercise, something that we have never practiced in the state. We had a lot of great lessons learned come out of it. So some of the specific questions that we wanted to address is how can we contact our state agency partners when I can't just email them or pick up the phone and call them? How can our state agency partners contact each other? If we are using handheld radios, how can we get radios into the hands of those agencies that don't typically have them for day-to-day use? We do have a lot of state agencies such as Public Safety, Department of Transportation, that no problem with the radios, they know how to use them, they know where to get them. Then we have other state agencies that have never had a radio. So we wanted to practice how to, again, not being able to communicate with them in advance, how to tell them where to go and get a radio, do some just-in-time training, and then do some sample communications tests. How can we be sure we're all communicating on the same frequencies or the same channels, and can we continue essential functions by way of radio only? So these were some of the specific radio communications objectives, and at this point, this is where I get to hand off to Jerry, because he's going to go into a little bit of detail on some of the specific objectives. and then a lot of the lessons learned that came out of it. We've had our initial after-action conference where all of our stakeholders had kind of put their lessons learned and evaluations and even some recommendations in there. So that's where Jerry can add some finesse to this part of the briefing.
I was the lead planner for the COM part of this exercise, and so we had to go through, decide what it was we were going to do. Ron was very clear in what he wanted us to do, and then the next thing was to get it initiated and actually carry it out. So my response was more like on the ground person. I was a coordinator and a evaluator. We had stuff going on at State EOC, we had stuff going on down here, and Susan Nordman was the controller and evaluator for us down here. We had to provide radios for state agencies, which Ron talked about. That kind of worked. And when I say it kind of worked, I mean, yes, we got the radios down here. They didn't particularly work when we got down here amongst all the tall buildings. But the guy who was down here doing that from our comm shop recovered from that and got the people checked in to our net, so it worked okay. For us at ADAM, we have a system from Arizona Public Service Company, which is provided to us, and it's an 800 megahertz trunking system, and we use that a lot. I've been around the state a lot. I don't think I've ever had a spot where it didn't work, except south of Tucson for a little ways. So it works very well for us. That's the thing that we focus on for our state communications. We always bring in the amateur radio community, and we did it on this exercise as well. That's the RACES, Radio Amateur Communications Emergency Services. They come in. The really nice thing about them is they have their own radios, and they can also use ours. They're spread around over the state. They love to do this kind of stuff, and so we use them, and we use them very effectively. If we had to go from here to other states, RACES could do it for us. And so I hope we can give them more things to do next year. We wanted to test the National Interoperative Field Exercise Guide called the NIFOG. There are frequencies in there, both non-federal and federal, that we can assign to operators, to agencies, to use if they need them. And that was one of the things we were going to test. The main thing we were going to test was the AIRS as a go-to system during a disaster. That was that's what we really wanted to look at. I don't know which way I'm going here. Communications channel was AIRS 1. That's Maricopa County. And so we were going to have all the state agencies that played. It wasn't 109. Do you remember, Ron, how many we actually had?
We ended up having about a little over a dozen agencies.
Yeah, so about 12. We were going to have them all come to the state EOC on AIRS 1. Okay. Then we were going to move them from AIRS 1 to either their own tactical channels or to the NIFOG channels, tactical channels, that we could move them off and get them off the command channel. Okay. So AIRS 1 was the command channel. Then they moved into their tactical channel somewhere out there. If they had no tactical channels to move to, then we were going to give them channels to move to from the NIFOG. And I checked all of that to make sure we could do that from the people that built the NIFOG, and that we got to do. One of the things that we noted for our improvement plan, and I'll go through some of these a little more in detail, was to integrate the tribal communications with AIRS. DRN is the DEMA radio network, and it's National Guard frequencies, which we use frequently. Okay. And then the 800 megahertz, which is the system we get from APS. We wanted to research more integration with the military radio nets. The military has fielded I think like 25 new radios to the armories. What we hope to do is be able to bring those armories in as places where people can go for shelter or for staging areas and things like that. So we kind of want to bring them into the system. And that system works very well. The plan for communications with the private sector partners and the BOADs, and that we still are working with. Some of the private sector partners already have radios, and so they're okay. Others don't. We need to work with them some more. And then we need to display a current communication capabilities, and we're going over that. Our improvement plan helped out a lot on that. Amateur radio service and data, multiple bands, was done by RACES operators. They all have to be amateur radio licensees, and it all worked very well. In amateur radio, we were able to take email or attachments, and we can send it by high-frequency radio, which we did. We just have to get to a gateway, which means we can get out of our bad situation here and get to somebody that can get us to the internet. We did that. We went through the San Diego Yacht Club. That just happened to be who we hit. And that took us up there, and we sent a message to Lou Trammell, much to his surprise. So anyway, that worked really well. DEMA Radio Net, that's the Arizona National Guard. We test that every Wednesday morning, and it worked well, as it does when we test it. AIRS 1 worked well. Okay, there was no problems with AIRS 1. For us, it didn't work quite as well, and I'll explain that to you. If not the next slide, I'll explain it anyway. I've used AIRS before, and I was up at the Schultz Flood for 2 weeks working with the incident management team up there on the wildland fire side. We used Schultz Flood. At the Schultz Flood, we used AIRS 2 very effectively until the sheriff came along and said, "Hey, State Fire, don't you have repeaters of your own?" "Yes, we do." "Get off of mine. I need it." And so we got off AIRS 2 then. But while we were using it, it worked very well. I was at the Wallow Fire. We used AIRS 4. That worked very well at the Wallow Fire. And at the same time, the Monument Fire was going on down in Cochise County, and they used AIRS 5. And so they all worked really well. We had a little bit of interference problem between AIRS 4 and AIRS 5, and one of the people beat it in, I guess. Mike Todd got that solved by just telling DPS to shut off one repeater. That took care of that problem. So it all worked very well. And one of the problems, I'm going to show you what the problem was for us. At ADEM, we used the 800 system, and as always, it worked really well with us. What's the problem that we have with it? Most of the state partners and other agencies don't have 800. We'd have to supply them with radio. Okay. What we had this thing set up to do was to have a net control station, and we found out there was a problem. In the amateur community, you talk about net control stations. Okay. In emergency services, you talk about dispatch, and that was a disparity. And that was my problem. I should have done that a little bit better. So what we're going to do is do the training and use of AIRS, and PSCC helped us a lot on that. We appreciate it. We had to deconflict dispatch, and what happened was that most of the agencies understood how to use the system. One or two did not, and so they were using it for tactical frequency, which denied it from everybody else, right? And our net control couldn't go in and stop that. So that was a deconflict. Was it an AIRS problem? No, AIRS worked just fine. So when we came out of all this, I thought the COMELs, which I've gone through that training, should learn about AIRS. And it's all online. They can go in and they can find out how to use it and do that. One of the problems that we had was don't use it for tactical communications. That was corrected almost immediately by Justin and Susan, who put that in on the web page, took care of that. Okay. One of the other things we want to do, and especially for next year's statewide exercise, is to use data communications more. Okay. We want to be able to send stuff by computer through the radio. There's a bunch of radio systems now that are available to us that operate off the computer and send that stuff. So that's what we want to do. I wanted to thank Susan and Justin, particularly for all of their help in making all of this happen and helping us to correct some of the problems. Any questions for me?
Yeah, this is Bill Pribble, Coconino County. Did I hear you correct that you said someone from the sheriff's office kicked you off of AIRS?
They didn't kick us off. They asked us if we could go to our own repeater so they would have that frequency available if they had a pursuit on I-40.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
Sorry, Sheriff.
Yeah, Bill Pribble again. You know, you made the comment AIRS shouldn't be used for tactical. In an area such as many of the rural areas, why wouldn't you want to use it for tactical?
Yeah, and that's a good point, and I wanted to talk to you about it for just a second. In the rural areas like the Schultz flood and Monument and Wallow fires, in rural areas it worked very well, and we used it for tactical communications. What we found out down here in the valley or in large urban areas, it's probably not going to work as well because there's too many people that want to use it. And they can use it provided they have a dispatcher that kind of keeps track of where the traffic's going and how they can do that. We could not do that effectively at the state EOC, so that was one of our problems.
Yeah, I would concur with that wholeheartedly. I can't imagine what it would be like down there if everybody was on AIRS using it for tactic. But we have used it numerous times with multi-agencies here in a tactical standpoint, and it's worked very well.
Yeah, thank you. And so have I in smaller, in less populated counties. I was going to say smaller. Yeah, Mike.
Did you simulate, doing a call out, or did you go through the whole process, or was it just simulated that you already had one there?
Yeah, what we did was, number one, this is the first time I've done any radio planning in which we started with nothing. Okay, all we had were radios. Everything else was down. And what we did was to use the communicator to do our call out at the state. However, it was down. Okay, and so they were able to bring it up through Tennessee and get the call out done. And we did a failover of Web EOC as well, and that bounced over to Virginia. And they got it back to do that. So yes, we did use it as our call out. As a backup, we did have call out lists for everybody to do.
Did you also establish like a comm coordinator at the EOC, or did you just use ComNow and out in the field?
We have very few ComNows. As far as ADEM is concerned, I may be the only one. Got some in the process. And I was a controller and an evaluator and not a player. So we did rely heavily on the comm shop people at ADEM and the state EOC, and they did a reasonably good job. And so that helped a lot.
The other thing, with the size and scope of this exercise, did you simulate calling in like ESF2 federal access to help do restoration services in the areas?
I don't know if they do that.
We did not involve any federal participation at this point, and I don't believe we even had the simulation of that. We strictly wanted to see if we can communicate within the state with our state agency partners just by way of radios. So there probably were a lot of what-ifs that could have been brought up. We were just trying to keep it localized for this particular exercise.
Anything else from me?
Just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
I mean, you got through all your objectives, and obviously you try to test your systems. It sounds like, do you find what was your needs as far as you have infrastructure needs that still need to be dealt with? You have equipment needs that need to be enhanced, either through modernization of equipment or whatever?
Yeah. Our main thing was that, yes, we have an 800 system. Do we have enough assets in it? Never. We never have enough. Okay. So we need to do that more. We have systems that we know or highly suspect are going to work without any problems. That's the National Guard for one, and they're off on the federal side. And then the amateur radio folks. So you have that. Did you have any?
I'll say another big lesson learned, probably the biggest one from my standpoint, is pre-planning. That all the participating state agencies have their versions of a communications plan or an annex to their continuity of operations plan, but at the state level and even some of the other agencies may not have a standardized plan that it's very easy to communicate for me to call you and say, hey, come to this location and get a radio. But if I can't call you in advance, then you need to know, if I can't communicate, where can I go to get a radio? So that's something we'll be following on with the working group to say, okay, if I can't communicate in any way, shape, or form, which key locations throughout the state can I go to pick up a radio, get that training? So we're working on a standardized communication plan. There's been one in the works for years, and this exercise was kind of a wake-up call to say we really need to finalize this plan, get rid of all of the stakeholders, and make this a formal, unified plan, at least at the state level, and then help each agency at their level come up with any specific objectives they might have as far as communication goes within their agency. So that's, again, on the technical side, I can't even say that we were limited on equipment because it seemed like at one point there were more than enough radios to go around. Only 4 agencies, I believe, came to pick up radios that did not have them.
Maybe 2.
Other agencies that played with us had conducted their own tabletop exercises outside of our exercise play, and they were, very well equipped with radios. And I did want to make a pitch for next year's exercise, focused on an extended power outage, which will involve continuity of operations and quite a bit of communications issues as well. Planning starts for that kicking off around January, and that exercise will take place around the November timeframe next year. So anybody who's interested in participating, invitations have already started to go out, and any questions about that, you can contact our office or through Susan. She can get word to us for anyone that has any objectives they want to test during that exercise.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Next on the agenda is Justin Turner to give us an update on NECP milestones applicable to state and local governments.
Thank you, Aaron. So the National Emergency Communications Plan. Today I want to go through, give a high-level overview of what NECP is, the vision and goals, and then really dive down more into the key objectives and initiatives and milestones in the NECP that apply to state and local government. And give you all an update on the progress that we've been making against these, and of course how all of that ties into our SCIP and the progress we've been doing over the last several years. For those not familiar, the National Emergency Communications Plan was first released in July of 2008. The plan was developed in coordination with public safety and service organizations, the private sector, folks really at all levels of government, to help put together one strategic plan nationwide for how we can improve emergency communications. And of course, interoperability is a key component of that. It deals though with all 3 facets of communications, if you will: operability, interoperability, and continuity of operations, or in this case, continuity of communications. The key element of that, though, is that it establishes 3 high-level goals and deadlines for agencies to be able to demonstrate performance for response level of emergency communications, and what those minimum baselines should be across the country, and deadlines for when everybody should be meeting those. From a high level, so the NECP is our national plan, and then at the state level, we have the SCIPs, the Strategic or Statewide Communications Interoperability Plan. Ms. Hanson earlier talked about the 2007 PSCC grant. One of the key requirements from that grant was that every state had to develop a SCIP, and the SCIPs, every state SCIP aligns with the National Emergency Communications Plan. In fact, at the back of our SCIP, we have several appendices that link both the national level objectives to our state strategic initiatives and objectives. And from our SCIP, of course, spells out our 12 strategic initiatives and the PSCC office plan, kind of guiding how both our office works, but also how Arizona is going to work to improve communications and to meet the goals outlined in the NECP. I think the easiest way to understand the NECP, and it really is a huge document, it rivals the SCIP in size. But it's the vision of the NECP is that emergency response personnel can communicate as needed, on demand, as authorized, across all levels of government and across all disciplines. Obviously a really simple thing to say, not so much to be able to implement. But to accomplish that vision, the NECP identifies 3 broad goals and a number of objectives, initiatives, and milestones for improving emergency communications. The goals, many of you are going to be very familiar with these. Goal 1, it was in 2010 that 90% of all urban area security initiatives had to demonstrate response level emergency communications within 1 hour. Goal 2 expanded that out to 75% of non-UASI jurisdictions able to demonstrate that same level, response level emergency communications within an hour. In 2010, the Federal Office of Emergency Communications came out and performed evaluations of both Phoenix and Tucson urban areas, the UASIs, did those assessments, both passed flying colors. In 2011, the PSCC office, following the national level guidance, conducted assessments of the 13 non-UASI counties in Arizona. Goal 13, I'll leave it up there, but I'll just preface it with all of this that, Goal 3. Goal 13, Goal 3, that's actually about as accurate as Goal 3 right now. The feds have been indicating now for at least the last year that the NECP will be rewritten and Goal 3 will be redefined. And so that's why you have not seen a lot of activity from our office on how are we going to meet this deadline next year that 75% of all jurisdictions are able to demonstrate response level emergency communications within 3 hours of a significant incident as outlined in national planning scenarios. It's that last clause there. There are a number of national planning scenarios, everything from very significant earthquake disasters. We do have our Palo Verde nuclear generation facility, but that very high-level type of event, Office of Emergency Communications has realized that goal is not going to be something that they're able to measure nationwide as originally envisioned. And so right now the NECP is being rewritten. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Goal 3 or 13, however we want to call it. Most of the objectives, initiatives, and milestones within the NECP actually apply at the federal level. Things like establishing the Office of Emergency Communications, a lot of the various programs that they have. But there are 3 objectives that specifically apply down at the state and local level. And those are the ones that I want to go through today. Objective 1 has to do with formal decision-making structures, that they're clearly defined. We've got leadership roles clearly defined, and that we're kind of all on the same page. I mean, I think we've really hit up NIMS and ICS significantly over the last several years, but that's kind of where Objective 1 is coming from. Objective 3, emergency responders employ common planning and operational protocols to effectively use their resources and personnel. This objective covers everything from plain language, but also, again, the NIMS ICS, that we're all set up in the same way. We approach planning from the same standpoint. We're all using ICS 205s to prepare our communications plans for larger events, for pre-planned events, those types of things. Objective 7, the nation has integrated preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery capabilities to communicate during significant events. This gets down to that continuity of operations. Do we have defined alternate and backup capabilities? Do we all kind of know where to switch to, as was just mentioned? If all of our communications are down, do state agencies know where to go to get a radio to reestablish communications? And obviously this goes much higher than, or beyond, much further beyond just that. So going through each one of these objectives, some of the initiatives and milestones, some of them were very simple. Milestone 112 was within 12 months, every state or territory should establish a full-time statewide interoperability coordinator or an equivalent position. We completed that back in 2008 with the establishment of the SWIC here within the PSCC office. Most states and territories across the country had met that. Right now there is, because of the lack of funding that was discussed earlier in the Homeland Security presentation, we're starting to see some states back away from their commitment. Although at a national level, and at the SWIC level, the National Council of Statewide Interoperability Coordinators are really working hard to get states to understand the importance of that position and to find funding to maintain that position so that we can keep that continuity going. But it's, this initiative 1.1, I kind of skipped over that, but it's about the kind of the governance level, the leadership level, primarily for strategic planning. Are we having the right conversations in place? Milestones 1.15, establishing a statewide governing body, interoperability governing body. And we here established the PSCC as our statewide interoperability governing body. In other states, it's their SIEC, and that's why you'll see in the milestone itself it calls for the SIEC, but that's what this body is here. Also, that the statewide interoperability governing body, or the PSCC, is either established via legislation or executive order. Here in Arizona, the commission is established via legislation. Initiative 1.3 comes down to strategic and tactical emergency communications planning. And in particular, is that planning occurring across agencies, across disciplines, and across jurisdictions? The key element for milestone 132, this is our first initiative where we're still in progress. I'll talk about where we're going on this in a little bit. But is the tactical planning occurring amongst federal, state, local organizations, both at the regional interstate level, but also within the state? The milestone for that is 2013. I mean, we're in progress on that. I think we have made significant efforts within Arizona to formalize structures and to improve on both our strategic planning, but our tactical planning and our asset control as well. Some of the SCIP initiatives that we have that directly relate to that milestone, first, of course, or that relate to Objective 1 for all of these milestones was Initiative 1, establishing the Interoperable Communications Governance Model and Plan, establishing our PSCC and SOP framework, and developing and implementing our training plan, developing and implementing a strategy for exercises, and of course our education and outreach activities. So these initiatives kind of help feed on or help advance Objective 1 and the various initiatives and milestones in these. Are there any questions on Objective 1? Oh, yeah, you may want to mute your phone. If you're on the phone, we hear a little bit of paper there. Thank you. So, Objective 3. Again, this is about employing common planning and operation protocols so that we can use our resources effectively. I'm not going to read all the way through Initiative 3.1, but the main thing is, have we standardized policy standards and procedures for communications? We adopted plain language. We have uniform channel naming. We have uniform programming within the radio so that when somebody is dispatched to go work an incident in an area where they're not familiar with and their radio doesn't work, when they pull out that cache radio, are they going to know how to get to the command channel? Are they going to know what tactical channel and where that channel is on their radio? Obviously, just-in-time training comes into play there, but it's also critical that particularly cache radios all be programmed with a common set of interoperable frequencies and consistent naming. So within those, one is milestone 3.16. Within 18 months, Department of Homeland Security was required to develop the NIFOG, or the National Interoperability Field Operations Guide, that agencies would program an appropriate set of frequency, band-specific, nationwide interoperability channels into all existing emergency responder radios. The key there's actually two keys there. One is the appropriate set of frequency-specific channels. A firefighter doesn't need to have the law enforcement tactical channels programmed into their daily operations radios. Cash radios should have all the bands. Higher up at the command level, they absolutely need to have both the broader interoperability frequencies as well as the discipline-specific frequencies, because you don't know who's going to be the incident commander on the scene, whether it's going to be the local fire chief or the police chief who's running that particular, or could be the sergeant running that particular incident. So it's not that all of the interoperability channels have to be programmed into radios, but it does need to be an appropriate set of frequencies. And there is a footnote within the NECP that kind of goes into further detail about that. The other kind of component of all of that is that if it's purchased through federal funding, then it needs to be a standard requirement. If you're buying radios using Homeland Security grant funds, or quite honestly any other grant fund, Department of Agriculture rural improvement grants, if you're buying radios using those federal grant funds, these interop channels should be programmed into the radios. So there are a few initiatives that line up with Objective 3. One is incorporating the use of the interop channels into our SOPs, and we've completed that here in Arizona with the interop channels plan. The next one is programming the radios into all existing emergency responder radios. We've made significant progress on getting the interop channels plan programmed into radios, but obviously that's still in progress. We can't say that every public safety radio in the state of Arizona has been reprogrammed right now, and I'll get into it in a little bit, the efforts that we're undertaking to help improve that particular milestone. And then the second level is incorporating the use of interop channels into training and exercises. Obviously, trainings and exercises are ongoing activities, and we need to continue to do that. But both the interop channels plan here in Arizona and all the combat courses that Susan goes to, she talks about the interop channels plan, so we're improving the use of those. As mentioned today, those interop frequencies used as part of the statewide exercise. The more we can do on that, the better off we'll be when it comes to actually using those and having everybody know how to effectively use AIRS or any of the other interoperability channels. The last milestone within 24 months, all SCIPs reflect plans to eliminate coded substitutions throughout the ICS, and that agencies incorporate the use of the interop channels into their SOPs, training, and exercises. So our SCIP, through our strategic initiative to establish a policy standards and procedures framework, one of the objectives of that initiative is to eliminate coded substitutions. And so we have met that milestone by having the initiative. While clearly there was a lot of progress we found during Goal 2 in terms of using plain language, particularly during interagency events, although obviously many agencies to this day continue to use coded substitution. Initiative 3.2 is implementation of the NIMS and the National Incident Management System and the National Response Framework across all levels of government. This kind of gets to the point of, are we using a common approach towards incident management and communications support? And we have policies and procedures that kind of help back that up. Within 12 months, all federal, state, local, and tribal responders within UASI districts have implemented communications and the national or NIMS within their jurisdiction, and this expands out to everybody. Here in Arizona, as part of the Homeland Security grant application process, agencies have to certify that they are NIMS compliant, and that's something that they do through the Division of Emergency Management. Again, the number of our SCIP initiatives help to reinforce Objective 3 from the NACP. Again, our governance, standard operating procedures, training, and exercise. And then Objective 7, the last broad objective that applies to state and local governments, is that the nation has integrated preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery capabilities to communicate during significant events. Again, this goes back to planning. Again, do we have continuity of operations planning? Do we have alternate or backup communications in case our primary method fails? It goes a little bit more into the significant event side, but again, all of these are kind of critical here at the state and local and the agency level, really, in making sure that these get implemented. It's one thing for our office to be able to establish a statewide policy, saying you'll program interop channels or saying that you'll have an alternate or backup emergency comms plan. It's a whole other thing for the local agencies to have it. From a broad standpoint, the two initiatives that apply to this objective define alternate backup capabilities and emergency communications plans and complete disaster communications training and exercise. On the second one, training and exercise is an ongoing activity. This is not something that really is ever complete. Although we've marked it as complete when we're referring or reporting to the feds, the reality is we do this ongoing all the time through the efforts of Division of Emergency Management and through the efforts of local agencies and county emergency management agencies. And again, it's pretty much the same strategic initiatives as earlier, but with also adding in the State Strategic Technology Reserve Initiative 5834 there. That initiative specifically establishing this State Strategic Technology Reserve, again, was a requirement of the 2007 PSCC grant and speaks directly to having those backup emergency communications. Any questions over initiatives and objectives? From a state of Arizona standpoint, out of those 11 initiatives, 9 of them we've reported as complete. There are 2 that we are still listing as in progress. The milestone 132 is tactical planning among federal, state, local, and tribal governments, and milestone 316, programming the nationwide interoperability channels into all existing emergency responder radios. On initiative 132, the primary activity that we're working on over the next year so that we can mark this as complete next year is making sure that we have TICPs in place in every county. We have done a significant amount of work on that initiative. Obviously, on the second one there, we have the interoperable channels plan passed now. There are a number of agencies that are implementing that and have actually already reprogrammed all their radios. And we think with narrowbanding, that's going to go further. So where we're at with that, on the very first milestone there with the strategic and tactical planning, we're doing a lot of planning, coordination, and governance here in Arizona. Just because we're marking it in progress does not mean that we have not met those goals. We're leaving it as in progress right now because we want to make sure that every county has a TICP. But there is a lot of planning that is occurring at multiple levels. Obviously, both of the urban area security initiatives, Phoenix and Tucson, UASIs. At the regional system level, strong governance in place amongst those 4 major regional systems, but also in other areas. We have county-wide governance structures, such as in Pinal County, their Radio Communications Consortium. We do strategic planning at the Homeland Security Regional Advisory Council level. At the interstate level, there's a number of organizations that our office and some of the other state agencies participate in. In fact, the Southwest Border Communications Working Group, a number of the public safety agencies along our southern border participate in those work group meetings and travel for those. At the FEMA Region 9 level, the Regional Emergency Communications Working Group. We also have a Region 9 SWIC working group where all of the statewide interoperability coordinators, from our region, about once a month, all come together for a conference call to discuss what we're doing in each state, what the challenges people are having, find, what are the best practices that you're doing in your state that we can bring over to ours. Good example of that was last month we sent Susan out to California to participate in their 3-day communications unit leader exercise so that we can bring those lessons learned back to here in our field day that we have coming up. So there's a lot of strategic planning going on at multiple levels. We're going to continue to work to improve those in accordance with Initiative 1. From a tactical planning standpoint, I'm not going to go through the whole chart because we kind of just went through this last July, but I did want to update that we now have a RFP that has been awarded for strategic and tactical planning, and so we're going to begin rolling out, particularly we're going to start in the North Rack with making sure Apache and Cochise County get their TIC fees done, Apache and Navajo County get their TIC fees completed. Coconino approved their TIC fee this last spring. Then we'll go down to the South Rack and make sure that all of the counties in the South Rack have their TIC fees completed. One of the elements, of course, you'll notice is that it's not just enough to have it, but it needs to be reviewed annually and revised as needed. And so we're working on making sure that counties have a annual review and revision process to keep the TIC fees up to date. The second initiative was the programming of the nationwide interoperability channels into all emergency responder radios. Last January, we approved the interoperable channels plan and the priority programming guide. Those are the recommended frequencies in Arizona, that appropriate set of frequencies that should be programmed into radios. The plan basically integrates the AIRS frequencies with the NIFOG frequencies, and we standardize the naming conventions across all of them so that we're consistent with the NIPSIC guidelines, or the National Public Safety Telecommunications Council guidelines. The plan, we went through a number of iterations in the first couple of years of the plan, but it really has stabilized now. We incorporated a lot of stakeholder and local feedback and corrected a couple of inaccuracies in a document that's large. It happens, but we think the plan is now really stabilized. It offers channels in the VHF, the UHF, and the 700 and 800 megahertz bands. So there are 4 sets of recommended interop channels that we encourage folks to program into their radios, and in particular, as part of their narrowbanding process, particularly VHF, UHF agencies, as they're reprogramming the radios to meet the narrowband requirement, this is when these need to be put in there so that there's no additional cost to load that in. From a statewide standpoint, our outreach plan for the last 2 years is really focused on promoting these interoperable channels, both obviously from the narrowband standpoint, but also when we were doing the NACP Goal 2 assessments. Our outreach team, when they were working on those, working with counties prior to NACP Goal 2, emphasized over and over, let's get those radio channels, or those channels programmed into the radios, because that was one of the key elements that was being looked at as part of the Goal 2 assessments. As for the after-action reports, 5 counties already had the interoperable channels programmed into the radios that were at that event. In 10 counties, we made the recommendation to program those. And I should mention, for those that may not have been part of the NACP Goal 2 process here, with the after-action report was, of course, just for the counties that participated, or just for the agencies that participated in a specific event. So if that particular event had agencies that did not have the channels programmed, even though maybe many other agencies in the county had already done that, the after-action is still going to reflect the need to get those frequencies programmed. Currently, 5 TIC fees do recommend the programming and the use of the interoperable channels plan And so as TICPs continue to be developed, we encourage them to include a policy statement within their TICP, recognizing the interop channels plan frequency as the interoperable channels for that county. From a state agency level, our office, the Arizona Strategic Enterprise Technology Office, AZPSIC, which PSCC is a part of, is responsible for IT oversight for all state agencies. Any IT project that is over $25,000 has to be approved by the Deputy Director of AZPSIC, which is also the chair of the PSCC, and the state CIO. Let me not forget that. And any project that's over $1 million goes before the Information Technology Advisory Council. Because of that, we have unique insight into all state agencies in Arizona. We know when they're buying radios, unless, they're not buying very many radios. But if they're buying a large chunk of radios, or even, 10 of the APEX 7000s, we're going to know about it. And so because of that, as a condition of approval for any of these land mobile radio projects, we are including that paragraph there in the second bullet point, that as part of their final deployment plan, that the agencies must program the interop channels plan into the radios that they're purchasing. And so that's significantly, and that's been in all of the different project investment justifications that have gone before our office this past year for narrowbanding, that condition has been included as part of the approval. And so that's really helped to drive state agency adoption of the interop channels plan. Moving forward, we're going to continue to push TICPs, continue to work at the regional level for strategic communications plans and improving regional governance structures. That level of regional planning and cooperation is really going to be key, particularly as the dollars start to disappear. Having a big system where we're all on the same channel, there's just no money to build out any more regional communication system throughout the state. But having good communications where everybody meets once a month to coordinate and to talk about what the problems are and to work on fixing them, that's how we're going to be able to continue to advance our strategic initiatives in these tight budget times. We're going to continue to encourage the use of the channels plan during exercises and in COMEL trainings. We're also going to continue our outreach efforts as much as possible to make sure that the other public safety associations throughout Arizona are also encouraging the use of these channel plans. That's really going to be how we're going to be able to mark that initiative complete next year. We know we're never going to be able to say with 100% certainty that every public safety radio in the state has been programmed with those. But if we can have a significant push over the next year and encourage agencies, particularly as part of their narrowbanding efforts, to get those frequencies programmed in there, then when incidents do occur, whether they're unplanned or large planned events, it makes it a lot easier for the COMEL if he knows that all the agencies that are going to be part of that county fair or responding to the big festival on the lake, if he knows that all those agency radios already have those frequencies, he doesn't have to figure out how can I get cash radios. People can just show up with their radios, their day-to-day operations radios. So we're going to continue to push that over the year, over the coming year. With that, are there any questions over the NECP milestones, the progress we've been making, or where we're going to head?
One quick question. Department of Homeland Security, when you issue grants or you award grants to these different agencies to help them augment their equipment and so forth, are there any prerequisites as far as when they're starting to get the multi-band radios and things like that to have these type of talk groups and channels mandatory when they buy this equipment?
We'll turn to our grants specialist back there, Lisa. Maybe Lisa, is there any requirement there, prerequisite?
Interoperable channels.
Interoperable channels?
We write it in the grant award letter and in the subgrantee agreement that there's a requirement for them to program in accordance with the PSCC office requirements for radios. So it's written actually in the award letter and in the subgrantee agreement that communications is in compliance with the PSCC.
And it's also a part of the national level grant guidance that interop channels. Now, excuse me, let me rephrase that, because at the national level, they don't require our interop channels plan. They have the language from the NACP there that the appropriate set of interop channels have to be programmed into radios. But it's part of that, any Homeland Security grant funds purchasing radios have to be P25 compatible or compliant. And same thing with the interop frequencies.
That's still in the SIEC, the technical specifications, guidance in there.
That's correct. Well, the Arizona Minimum Equipment Standards addresses P25 compatibility, the number of channels, minimum number of channels that need to be programmed, narrowband capability. I believe those are the three, right? The fourth is just what the frequency band is. And the number of display characters. If the radio has a channel display, it needs to have a minimum of seven characters display. So the minimum equipment standards doesn't address the channels plan, but the channels plan addresses these are the ones that have to be in. And those two really are the two key policies statewide that are helping us to standardize equipment purchases across the state and to improve interop.
Just quickly, thank you, Lisa Meyerson, State SWIC. I'm traveling tomorrow to the biannual national meeting of SWIC, and one of their topics is going to be next generation NACP. So I will bring back information and make sure to do an overall summary of what happened at the meeting and highlight that as well in terms of where they're going with the NACP.
Other questions for Justin? Justin, thank you very much. Next on the agenda is an SIEC update.
Okay, thank you. Director, Commissioners, thanks for having me. I'm here, Paul Wilson couldn't make it today. Just give you a little update on our meeting, and actually I think, as usually happens, Justin just covered much of what we do. And in the next presentation, you'll get the rest of it, so I just get to talk to you here for a second, and I'll try and make it quick. One of the things, the AIRS Improvement Sustainability Plan was other than our minutes, was our only action item that we had at our last meeting. And, this was something that we looked at over a few meetings. I think Karen put it together, did a good job. And really what it's looking at is the future of AIRS, and in the areas where, agencies have decided they wanted a little bit better coverage, and maybe, the Department of Public Safety doesn't have resources to put it there, but they want it. What are really the guidelines of putting it there and also taking it out? And between that, what if it breaks down? What are the notifications, and who's taking care of it? So it really clarifies that, the IGAs, MOUs, and it at least gives an opportunity for an area to put in their own part of the AIRS system. And maybe since a lot of my other stuff was covered, and a lot of you know that AIRS is my soapbox, as we talked about AIRS earlier, I'd really be hesitant to say the repeated frequencies are the command frequencies. I know Sheriff Cribble gave a good example. I'll tell you, the Sheriff's Department is one of the best law enforcement agencies using it in our area anyway, going over, working with multi-agencies. But, sure, the general thought is it's going to be your command frequency, but mostly what we use AIRS for in our area, where I think it has its biggest impact, are on the smaller incidents that are tactical in nature, like Sheriff Cribble talked about. But also on the bigger incidents, you got to look at the tools in your toolbox. And a prime example I can give that we were thinking of AIRS 2 as being a command frequency was in a planned event. It was a memorial service for a mid-air collision 4 years ago. And as we got into it, we quickly realized who needed to use the repeated AIRS frequency. Well, it was the law enforcement branch, because they were doing traffic control. They had the multi-agencies that were different spectrum. So we used VTAC 13 as our command frequency. We have a Sheriff's Department representative as the law branch director, VHF radio to talk to the law branch, and it worked perfectly. So sometimes we just got to use the tools that we have and don't assume they're going to be used for something else. So I'm sorry to get off on that, but that is one of my soapboxes. The interoperable channel plans that Judson just talked about, really, we didn't need to make any changes to it. It has kind of stabilized. I think it's a good thing that it's stabilized because we were starting to get feedback on, what's the channel plan du jour? Is it going to change again next week? We don't want to program our radios. We don't want to have this. It has stabilized almost probably close to a year now that we haven't changed anything on it. And I think getting the information out, really publicizing that folks need to put it in. I do believe what came out of the NEC People 2 evaluations and what we're doing with the TIC-Ps has helped. Again, in our area, just anecdotally, I can say our emergency services, or our county emergency manager, our last LEPC meeting was pushing it. We're going to get a technical assistance grant to do a tabletop on our communications. Really pushing everybody to make sure they had everything programmed in. So hopefully all the areas, all the counties in the state are doing that. The comm unit training recognition program, things that have gone on, I think now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we've had roughly 12 COML classes in the state. I think we've had 2 COMT classes, or did we have a third?
We've had 2. The third is coming up at the end of the month.
Third's coming up at the end of the month. So out of that, there's been about 181 COML students. There's 18 recognized COMLs out of that, which really I don't think is unexpected based on the way the task book worked and who were taking the classes. Now we want to work on getting more people to be able to complete their task book, which is one of the reasons that we really would like to get this COML field day going. The COMT is new classes. We have 1 recognized COMT in the state as of our last meeting. But we have another COMT class coming up in this area.
Yeah, and the 26th through the 30th, that's the last
I'll
meeting.
look to Susan for the exact dates. I'll be the straight man and she can fill it. Okay, so that's moving along. I think the recognition program is really stabilized also and is working well with the committee and getting the information in, and they've got really a good system down. I know Mike could help you with any questions on that if you'd like. So I've given you some of the numbers there, recognition webinars. We were actually participating in a webinar because Arizona was recognized as one of the leaders in the way, or one of the model agencies for the way that we've set up our system. And again, that goes straight to the PSCC office, and we've been able to work on it through the SIEC. But it is a smooth system. Like I said, they've stabilized, they work well together, they're able to get through those workbooks, get back, the task books, get back to the folks, and we really have a good system in place that's one of 3 recognized, is really a model system. So I think that's all we have on there. The broadband stuff, well, I tell you what, that's one I can't even hardly dig into. I made a few jokes about it at our last meeting, but this is something that's so early. We really don't know what's going on. We're trying to participate. I know Michael Britt's participating, representing the PSCC, really trying to keep us up to date on what's going on. But that's one we're just getting updates on, and I'm not going to try and kid you. That's not something I have much information on. So we got that, and Arizona's participation there. Multiple projects, you're going to have that presentation next, which was very similar to ours. But, a lot of what we're looking at it. And I think for the SIEC last year, big parts of what we did were the NEPC Goal 2 stuff, a lot with the interoperable channels plan, the technical assistance grants, what was going on with the TIC-P development. So I think that's where we really had our biggest impact. And then we're seeing what's going to happen moving forward.
Expanding COML to COML.
Oh, the COML program, the recognition program, having that work group put together was a big part of our last year's achievements. Okay. So this is what we have coming up. Our next meetings here, we did talk about having meetings in different areas of the state similar to what you've done, so we're going to talk more about that. Also really try and talk more about the field day, if we can get that going, system updates, etc. Any questions for me? All right, thank you.
Mark, thank you very much. The next agenda item is an update from Lisa on the PSCC office and multiple projects.
Actually, I'm going to hit this up.
Excellent. Thanks, Justin.
Start groaning, she's getting up there for another big presentation. I would like to point out we did not have broadband on the agenda today. I think this is probably the first time this year. So, but that's because today there was the Arizona Digital Connection Summit going on, and Chairman Sandine gave a keynote speech earlier today, and then Michael Britt is on a panel right now as we speak with a couple of other folks from Arizona talking about FirstNet and the progress that's being made. There are a few things I do want to highlight in our multiple project updates.
I have a 100-point presentation if you guys would like to see it.
Yeah, and it is a beautiful. Arizona's much better. He has lots of pretty pictures in his presentation. This is a reporting season for us, so beyond the annual report that this body approved earlier, we did submit our fiscal year 2012 annual report to the JLBC from the PSCC office. And then we have also submitted from the PSCC office our annual SCIP implementation report to the feds. Both of those reports have been posted to the PSCC office website under the reporting menu. A couple of key events I wanted to highlight. One, December 11th, we have received this year one of the technical assistance awards that we received from the Office of Emergency Communications was to help incorporate communications into training and exercise. And this particular TA has evolved over the past year. Initially, OEC felt that there ought to be a training and exercise plan specific to communications. But as more thought was put into the process, it really evolved into not having separate training and exercise plans for communications separate from everything else from emergency management, but instead to really improve the education on how can we effectively get communications a key part of all trainings and all exercises. And so we have been working with OEC to develop a day-long workshop to really, it's more focused for exercise and planning personnel, but we are asking agencies that along with their exercise personnel or training personnel, depending on how an agency is set up, they also send one of their communications people so that we can kind of talk about when you're doing an exercise, let's say Department of Health and pandemic flu exercise, thinking about incorporating their communications plan into that whole exercise and testing communications at every single exercise. So this workshop is really designed to give those folks an idea of what their concerns need to be, how to address communications during the planning process, what types of injects are appropriate for testing communications, some of the do's and don'ts of incorporating communications, how to craft the scenarios, developing after-action plans that are actually actionable and that can help identify what the key communications problems were that were discovered during an exercise and how to improve them. This workshop is going to be led by Dr. Jennifer Harder. Oh goodness, I've forgotten his name, but it's on the sheet. And John Tersano, both from the Office of Emergency Communications, and both of them have significant experience both developing exercises, but also with being team leads during major communications incidents. So we're going to be sending this out, but I did want to highlight this and encourage people to register for this day-long event. It will be held over at the Carnegie Center just down the street, December 11th from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Two other big events, Pima County and the Tucson UASI will be revising and updating their KP on December 4th. The hyperlinks are available there in the Interop Channels plan, and that'll be at the Fire Central Conference Room. And then Maricopa County will be offering a weekend offering of the ComL class at the end of January, beginning of February, here in Maricopa County. This is a little bit different. Normally we have held, it's a 4-day class, and normally we have held the ComL classes Monday through Thursday. there was a significant amount of interest when we've done 2 stakeholder surveys on where Commonwealth classes should be held throughout Arizona, and we received a significant amount of interest to have these broken up as a weekend offering, recognizing that not everybody works a standardized shift. So we're giving this one a try, January 26th and 27th, February 2nd and 3rd. For those that are concerned about the Super Bowl, I would highlight that February 3rd there usually is a closer to a half a day. In fact, by the time this particular class rolls out, the Commonwealth class the curriculum may have been modified from a 4-day to a 3-day class. So don't get too concerned about the Super Bowl. But this is one of the Commonwealth classes that we have. I think we're going to have enough money for about 4 or 5 more Commonwealth classes. So we're running towards the end of this grant, but we do want to encourage participation in that. A couple of the other items I want to highlight from the report, and again, I'm not going to go all the way through, but I did want to hit on narrowbanding, since this is our last meeting before the deadline. When our next meeting comes up, we'll have been past the narrowbanding deadline, and every single radio will have been reprogrammed. That's what we're hoping. Obviously, that's the goal. But within your handout, and it's probably a lot easier to read in the handout, we have made significant progress from a license standpoint, because one of the keys to narrowbanding is you first have to update your license with the FCC before you do the reprogramming. There's now less than 10% of transmitters in Arizona are still licensed only for wideband use. There's about 711 out of the almost 7,500 UHF or VHF transmitters in Arizona that have not had their license updated yet. That indicates to us that about 90% of the state is moving forward with their narrowbanding or is in that process. The typical cycle for the licenses, folks will first update to a dual license where they have both the wide and narrowband emissions designator on their license, so that they can go through in phases updating all of their both repeaters and their handhelds. And then once their narrowbanding project is complete, they update to the narrowband only. Right now, 24% of transmitters, I should say these numbers are for fixed transmitters. We don't get into the actual number of mobile handhelds. But about 24% of all transmitters have already gone all the way through the process and are completely narrowbanded. That's a significant amount of progress. For the agencies there that are still wideband only, our office has been in constant communication at least once a month trying to move forward. There are a couple of agencies who have submitted waiver requests. In particular, the city of Mesa has a pending waiver request. Excuse me, is that the one that was just ordered? It was the Pima County one, and Pima County also had a waiver request submitted. Pima County had their waiver approved here recently. The Mesa one is still pending. Underneath the charts in your handout, obviously on paper this won't work, but the electronic copy on the website, there are a number of links there. In particular, if you'd like to drill down into a particular county and see which of those agencies are still wideband only, you can drill down to the county level. There's some great maps. You can actually click on each individual repeater and see where that repeater is located, who owns it, and what the point of contact is. There's also a link there if you'd like to view the various requests for waiver that have been submitted from Arizona. You can click on that link to get both the requests and whatever pending action the FCC has taken. I will note from an editorial standpoint, we've been monitoring the FCC waiver docket here very closely over the last several months. The Public Safety Bureau, of which almost all of the transmitters that we're concerned about will be licensed through that bureau instead of the Mobility Division, or I think there's one other division that's also reviewing waivers. But the Public Safety Bureau has been very slow in granting waivers, to the extent of maybe 4 or 5 per month. So while I do expect there will be some action still taken, just a quick look of all the waiver requests that have gone in, it's probably less than 10% have actually had final action taken on them so far. So if somebody is still considering a waiver, I would highly encourage them to get in touch with me. We can talk about the requirements that they're expecting to see. They are going to expect to see very detailed action plans and justifications for why a waiver should be granted. There's also, of course, a whole bunch of other resources and tools that are available on our website. From an AIR standpoint, it was mentioned earlier in the ADEM update, some of the challenges experienced during their exercise. From that, we have updated the AIR's webpage on our website to emphasize what information was already available in the AIR's SOP, in particular the priority order use of AIRS. We're kind of stepping up some of our outreach efforts on that to make sure folks know what's in the AIRS SOP and know that priority order and how to use AIRS. But we've also stepping up our communications to stakeholders. So whenever there is an exercise that's using AIRS, if folks contact our office, we will notify the AIRS MOU subscribers if there's an exercise or other planned event, and we have some kind of guidance there on what to do both before and during an event when AIRS is being used for an exercise. And testing an exercise is one of the authorized uses of AIRS. That's, I believe, priority order number 5 there. So we're just trying to improve some of our outreach there to help folks understand that. A lot has been going on the broadband front. Again, I'm not going to go through it all, but Michael did put a big section in here on what some of the latest updates were. There was a notice of information that came from the NTIA and was actually due last Friday, and Arizona submitted comments. We've worked with the PSCC's Public Safety Broadband Network Working Group to draft those comments and get those submitted. Primarily, the notice of intent was to seek comments on 2 items. One, at the FirstNet's first presentation, or first meeting, they had 2 presentations, one on a potential business model or conceptual model, and one on a potential model for deploying applications on the network. And so the NOI was to request feedback on both of those. And so our comments are available if you'd like to review those comments that the work group submitted. We also signed on with what is now termed the Early Builder Advisory Council. This was formerly the group of waiver recipients that had all started to build broadband networks. Arizona is still a part of that organization. We also signed on with their comments that were submitted. Lastly, I did want to highlight a couple of the handouts there. I already mentioned the incorporating communications into public safety exercises. I would please encourage stakeholders to send your training and exercise personnel, whether they're involved in the design or planning phase. Maybe they're just the coordination or the point of contact that works with other folks. This is an opportunity for us to kind of expand our pool beyond just the communications folks and start reaching out to some other folks who we're not normally in. And then there are also handouts for the 6P update in Tucson, or the Pima County 6P, and for the upcoming COMEL class. With that, are there any questions?
I have a question. I just had a couple of additional comments on the national meeting.
Yeah.
Anyone have any questions for Justin first? Thank you, Justin. Great update as always. At the national meeting, there was a recent merger on the federal level between the Office of Emergency Communication, which is our primary contact as SWIFT and around the country, with the National Communications System. And the head of the National Communications System is now taking over OEC as the director of OEC. And the former head of OEC, Office of Emergency Communications, is becoming the deputy. That was announced officially, I We knew it was coming for a while, but it was announced officially in late October. We immediately sent a request that that gentleman put an appearance at this national meeting so we can all meet him and make sure that there's not going to be a shift in priorities away from the focuses that this group has historically had. And so he will be attending and will be speaking, and I will bring back some news regarding how that goes. In addition, NTIA is sending the head of their group, which will be responsible for the state and local government broadband grants. That person will be at this meeting speaking about what we can be expecting with those broadband grants. And also 2 of the, I believe there's 6, FirstNet board members, regardless of the number, 2 of them are going to be speaking at this meeting, and they're in person. So we'll have quite a few updates, and we'll put together an update for you, because we're not going to meet again until early part of next year. I will make sure to put together a written update similar to the updates that we provide on multiple projects regarding that meeting and anything we learned from that meeting, which is happening over the next few days. So, thank you.
Any other questions for Justin or Lisa? Great, thank you very much, Justin. Very last thing on the agenda is call the public. Nothing? Okay, excellent. Justin, when's the next meeting?
The next meeting, we are still working on the 2013 schedule. We do intend to keep it at the 1 to 3 time frame on the, it was the second or third Tuesday, but it's a matter of scheduling out and getting the room. So once we have the PSCC and IAC meeting scheduled for 2013, we will email it out to everybody and post it to the website. We expect the next PSCC meeting to be in February.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the Commission? All right, with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much. Thank you on the phone.